I'd like to thank Thomas and Owen for inviting me along. It's been a great pleasure to be here so far, listening to the excellent speakers. Ray, I am one of your potential voters, or was one of them, for the Senate elections. Better luck next time for both of us, perhaps. And Brendan, that was inspiring, and I agree with everything you've said. And we heard, he and I have talked about this during the break, that it's abominable, the neglect of our history and the disrespect for it, and that's something you touched upon, and it's very, very important. My name is Gerry McGeough. I'm from Tyrone, and what we used to call, and some will still do, British occupied Ireland. I was born there in 1958 and grew up in the pre-Troubles era and throughout the Troubles era as well. So my family were driven out of neighbouring County Armagh by Cromwell, so we've lived there for centuries, and quite close to where our farm is, just a few fields away, there is the ruins, or they are the ruins of an old friary, and that friary was the epicenter of the 1641 Great Catholic Rebellion. One of the friars present, Tarlach O'Malley, kept at the instigation of the Kilkenny Confederacy. He was asked to keep a record, and he did. It's known as Kinley Valin, or Friar O'Malley's Journal, as we call it in English. And it is actually in the library in Cork. So it exists still. It's written in the now extinct East Ulster Irish dialect, but it's a wealth of information, not just about the events of the 1641 rebellion or an uprising, but also topography, the names of places that have now disappeared, and even weather reports and so on and so forth. But in any case, all of this is a kind of part and parcel of my background. The area we come from has been a hotbed of rebellion and risings all over the generations and all over the centuries. I myself have dedicated my entire adult life to a united Ireland. And for that, in pursuit of that ideal, I've been shot, imprisoned, shot at, put under death threats. I've been beaten in interrogations, and I found myself becoming the only Irish Republican ever to be extradited from Germany to the United States. And I don't suppose there's going to be any follow-ups to that, and I certainly hope not. But in any case, all of that is based on an Ireland that I don't see at the moment. The idyllic Ireland that I and others put life, limb, and liberty on the line for isn't here anymore. And we have to question that. We have to ask ourselves, why is that the case? And we have to ask ourselves, how can we go and bring it about? Now, I'm going to say this to you here right now. Ireland, the whole of the island of Ireland, the 32 counties, but particularly the 26 counties, Ireland is heading for a calamitous catastrophe, or a catastrophic calamity, whichever way you want to have it. And I'm saying that not as an economic expert, I'm saying it not as a religious mystic, I'm saying it as someone who is quite familiar with Irish history. Ever since we imbibed Christianity in the Pope-Patrician era, Ireland has flourished under the title of Christ, with Christ as our king. And in the early centuries, right after St. Patrick was here, this became known as the land of saints and scholars, not for any romantic reason, but because it was a hard fact. Even the old Anglo-Saxons looked to the Gaels and called us their older brothers in Christ, because it was the likes of St. Columba and whatnot who evangelized amongst them. And also, during that period, we sent missionaries all over the known world, from Iceland to what is now the Ukraine. We sent them all over, establishing monasteries and scholastic homes and houses right across continental Europe. And then the people turned their back on the faith. They turned their back on the faith, and what happened? Disaster. The monasteries began to fight among themselves, began to raid one another. It degenerated. And what came along? The Vikings. The Vikings came in or about 800 and turned this place into an absolute nightmare. We can't even begin. I know we joke about the Vikings now, the guys, the horns, and all that. These were absolute terrorist pirates, utter heathens. Dublin, where we're standing at the moment, was at any given time the biggest emporium for slaves, Irish slaves, boys and girls who were captured out in the countryside or beyond, wherever, after battles, whatnot, hauled into the emporium. 1,000 slaves at any given time over generations. And these poor people ended their days in Denmark, southern Sweden, in Constantinople, in North Africa, wherever, shipped out as slaves to end their lives away from home, away from Ireland. But we overcome that when the people turn back to the faith. And the embodiment of that faith, of course, is Brian Boru. And we all know the story of Brian Boru. It's romanticized, it's all the rest of it. But he had, based on the Carolinian experience, was formally bringing about an Irish kingdom, a united Irish nation, one that was based on the Catholic faith and based on education. And it almost came to pass. But then again, the people went down again. We, if you want to use the term degenerated, we turned our backs on the faith. And along came the Anglo-Normans. And we all know the history of that. So at every point in time in Irish history, when the people turn away from the faith, calamity descends upon the nation. And we are corrected. God is correcting us because we are a chosen people to evangelize for Christ throughout the world. And when we refuse to do what is our vocation, we get whipped into line until such time as we decide to do so. But never in the history of Ireland, ever have we not only turned our back on the faith, but we have aggressively spat in the face of God and said, what are you going to do about it, God? Well, I'm quite sure he's going to do something about it very, very soon, which is why I say a calamity is coming here. And we, those of us Gad, and many like us right throughout the country, know that that is happening, and we know that we must prepare. We must prepare by returning first and foremost to the faith and by building groups based on an Irish nation that is loyal to the Catholic faith, loyal to our Christian roots, to our heritage, one that respects the heritage, the history of our nation, one that respects the unity of our nation, one that says, and as I say, England out of Ireland, Ireland out of Europe. We can run ourselves. We can rule ourselves. This is a wonderful country, a wonderful island, and the Irish island of Ireland is only 1/9 of the national territory. We own way out into half across the Atlantic, and that is full of wealth, mineral wealth, marine wealth, you name it. Why can't we harness that ourselves? We must become a maritime nation, and we must decide we can do it ourselves. We don't need to be subservient to Europe. We don't have to run off to Brussels every 5 minutes to get permission to do something. We don't have to have the British kicking in our doors and kowtowing to the unionists and other planters. We are the native Irish people. We are the ones who can run our own country, and we need to set our mindset to do that. In 1984, I found myself in a United States federal prison in the southern state of New Jersey, the flat pinelands there. I had been moved from Schuylkill, the mountains of Schuylkill in Pennsylvania, and I was there because I allegedly tried to ship weapons over to the struggle in the north. In any case, I was not only the only Irish Republican in that particular jail of hundreds and hundreds of men, but I was the only Irish-born person, or some Irish Americans, but I was the only Irish-born person there. And there was a whole mix of races and ethnicities and religions and you name it. But in any case, the prison was fairly new. It was still being built insofar as we were still building fences and barbed wire and outposts along the edges. And on one occasion, a gentleman who identified himself as an American Indian, a Native American Indian, he was part American Indian, there was a group of them together. He said, look, I'm just telling you, man, this place is going to blow. It's an absolute tinderbox. There's going to be a massive riot here. And what happens is the guards, the administration staff, they all move into what is kind of a big baseball type field in the middle, and they are evacuated out by helicopter, and they stay back for 3 days. So during that 3 days, there's going to be absolute total mayhem. And he says, we have stashed shanks, which are homemade knives, in such and such a place. We want you, we're going to look after you. Grab a shank, and you run with us to that building. We're going to climb to the roof, and we're going to stay up there and hold it. If anybody gets in your way, shank them. So I went along politely with this advice and hoped that, sage and all as it was, hoped that I would never be around that particular jail for when that particular apocalyptic scenario unfolded. But in any case, it was, and as an aside, this is something a lot of people don't know, I learned it while I was there, that in the event of a nuclear war, and this is an aside here, in the event of a nuclear war, white-collar, minimal security federal prisoners are immediately inducted as slave labor. These are the guys, you know, the bankers and all the rest of them. They become slave labor. The rest, those in medium and high security, are locked up, put into a lockdown, and the US military is sent in, and they go from cell to cell shooting all the prisoners. So that seemed fanciful back in the 1990s, but thank God I'm not in a federal prison in the United States, given the current geopolitical situation. We know where things are could potentially develop. But in any case, there was an interesting development there insofar as what he was telling me, there was a strategy. The powers that be had a strategy. They were going to allow the riot, whatever it was, uprising, whatever it was, to peter itself out, blow itself out, leave them there for 3 days. And then after the 3 days, they believed that all the groups would turn on one another. They would turn on one another and kill one another left, right, and centre, and they'd be weakened, greatly weakened. And then, and only then, would they rain in tear gas, and in comes the National Guard with orders to shoot to kill. And anyone who didn't, who resisted, would face that potential penalty. So the rest would be subdued. Now that is a strategy that's worth keeping in mind. Today's Ireland, I need hardly tell any of you here today, is a situation whereby the lunatics have totally taken over the asylum. And if we needed any evidence of that, we only had to listen to the Joe Duffy show fairly recently. And in that set of circumstances, we can only but tactically wait, retreat tactically. But our strategy must be completely different. We retreat tactically, and sooner or later the cracks will develop, and sooner or later the inmates of Bedlam will turn on one another. And we are already seeing that happening. The first cracks are developing. And I said, let them, stand back, let them. Now in the north, we have a different set of circumstances to down here in the south. And you know, there was a time that I was longed to be part of the Irish nation, when that I understood as a child. But quite frankly now, I'm not sure I want to be united with a country where grown men wearing lipstick and makeover and pre-pubescent girl clothing strut around the streets and are fawned over by politicians, commentators, and all the great and the good. What sort of a country is that? Who would want to be united with that? A country that kills its own children. It had to be forced on us in the north, but they voted for it here in the south. Now, getting back to God, the wrath of God, they invited it. They invited it when they voted for homosexual marriage back in whatever year it was, 2015. The people invited the wrath of God. They guaranteed it when a couple of years later, they voted to kill our own Irish children en masse. And it has grown and grown and grown exponentially since. The little narrow kind of laws at the beginning have now, they're throwing them out, basically free for all. So they've invited the wrath of God. That's why I'm saying it is coming. Now, possibly it could be averted if Mary Lou McDonald, Michelle O'Neill, Ivanka, what's her name? Bacik, whatever her name is, Zaponi, got on their knees on the cobbles of Dublin Castle, began saying a week of rosaries, and led the entire nation in prayer and fasting for an entire week. It would be averted. That's probably not going to happen. So all we can do right now is mitigate it. And we are mitigating it in the north, and I'm happy to say in the south, by groups of people getting together, people who are instinctively nationalistic at heart, people who are strongly traditionally Catholic, and we are going out and we are praying the rosary. We're praying the rosary in public, and we're not afraid or ashamed to say we're praying the rosary. We make it clear. In fact, we pray it so publicly that I even got punched in the face a few months ago, as you may or may not recall, for praying the rosary in public. But that hasn't deterred us, that hasn't stopped us. And more and more coming out. And we are willing to, our ancestors endured dungeon, fire and sword to keep the faith alive in the hills and glens and little hamlets of Ireland. So what right are we to let it slip just for political correctness or just for an easy life? None whatsoever. What we must do is emulate them and be prepared to endure what they endured. Grinding poverty for centuries, burned at the stake, stabbed, cut, shot, imprisoned, whatever it might be. We have to have the faith, the strength of faith, and the courage to go ahead and do that. Our opponents, McGeough, do not have courage. They don't have courage. Take away the money, the slush funds that finance these NGOs and all the rest of it. Take all that away, you wouldn't see any of these people on the streets. You wouldn't see any of these ridiculous flags that are like mushrooms developing by the day practically. None of them would be there. There's no money for it, they won't do it. They may sit on the keyboards and try to backstab a few people. Who cares about that? Don't worry about that, that's nothing. But they would just be. We, on the other hand, are motivated by a higher plane of motive. And that is by God, by Christ himself. And I am happy and proud to say that I am a traditional Catholic and a rabid Irish nationalist. And I would settle for nothing else short of this being an independent Irish nation. And I believe we can do that. I applaud the guys here today. I applaud the Burkean. I applaud other groups around the country who are doing something similar. They have little publications going, they're having meetings, they're having discussions, they're reaching out to people. And above all, they are standing up, because there's nothing they hate or fear as much as us proclaiming our Catholic faith with a good, strong backbone, a good heart full of courage. They can't stand courage. Courage is what we need. And we must be prepared, absolutely every single one of us, to stand up, stand together, realize we're not alone. What they want to do is isolate you, marginalize you, stick you on your own so you think you're a crackpot. But that's not the case. We are far bigger, much stronger than that, and we have the blood of the martyrs behind us. Centuries of martyrdom are backing us. We pray to those martyrs. We invoke them. We invoke their help. We invoke their courage. We ask them to come to our assistance as we rejuvenate and bring back the Catholic faith here in Ireland. It's not acceptable. Even Hollywood, when it's portraying, at least in the old days, not that long ago, when it was portraying Ireland, you always had the Catholic priest. You always had the Gurus and all the rest of it, but they were running around with rosary beads. Hollywood understood Ireland was a Catholic country. It's not a Buddhist country. It's not an Islamic country. It's not an atheist country. It's not a whatever these other people, neo-pagan country. It's a Catholic country. That's our destiny. That is our vocation. We must re-establish our Catholic credentials in this country. And when we do that, think about the time post-famine, when the Catholic Church began to regroup, when we saw the sudden building of schools and cathedrals and churches and convents, and the absolute surge of vocations. There were nuns to send all over the world. There were priests galore. There wasn't enough places in Ireland to put them, so they sent them to the diaspora. A diaspora that was overseas, sending money back, the maids and the builders, to build the likes of Armagh Cathedral, to build all the great cathedrals all around Ireland. To do it despite the British, to show the landlords that we can have our big houses as well in the form of the house of God. And that's what we did. And as a nation and a people working together, we were all powerful. And when the Catholic Church got control of religion, the Christian brothers, who have been much maligned, they were the ones that put nationalism and taught the real Irish history, not I am a good little English child rubbish, but they taught the real Irish history to the people. And what became of them? They grew up patriotic. We had the Gaelic League, we had the GAA, and we had the 1916 Rising. And after that, we managed to establish, at least in part of Ireland, an independent country, or a country at least that could run itself, and one in which we produced even thousands more devout Catholics. Now, anybody ever I meet who is of a certain age will tell you that the country that they grew up in was a wonderful country. Oh, it was poor, okay, there were problems with this and problems with that, wasn't a lot of work about and all the rest of it. But you could walk into any house, anywhere in the country, a complete stranger, and the people would settle you down, have a bit of crack, give you a cup of tea, and let you stay the night if you had to. Dare you even think of doing that now, if you could even get through the electronic gates? But dare you think of it? No. We've changed. The people, we're all the DNA same, but our mentality has changed. We've lost our faith. Our faith gives us courage. Our faith gives us hospitality. It gives us decency. And it gives us the urge to evangelize, to go out around the world. But now we need to start evangelizing at home. We have to clean up our own house. We have to be strategic here. Now we must wait, let them fall apart, and we go in and we need to know what it is we're trying to establish. It has to be Gaelic, Catholic, and free, without a doubt. Nothing else. Nothing else counts. Really is nothing else that counts. And those who are not Catholic, we must try to convert them. In the north, Sinn Féin has coasted along on the demographic reality. The demographic reality being that the Catholic families are always bigger. We are getting bigger. So now we have reached the point where we could vote the British out practically because we have the numbers. So what does Sinn Féin do? Sinn Féin runs off to the British government, to the successors of Thatcher's Tories, and begs them to bring abortion clinics into the north of Ireland. And even when they do that, they only exist in a few areas because the people won't do it. Simply they won't do abortions west of the Van. Simple as that, practically. So what have they done? The local Gauleiter, the Tory guy, Lewis, whatever his name is, he has said that we are morally bankrupt. Can you imagine? We are morally bankrupt because we won't kill our own children. Well, I say to him, you are doing the exact same as Cromwell did and every other English tyrant all the way back to the arrival of the Anglo-Normans. You are trying to exterminate the Irish race. You're trying to reduce our numbers. That is the goal. Get rid of the Irish. Get rid of them in their own country. Kill them by famine, kill them by war, kill them by emigration. Oh, now kill them with contraception and abortion and homosexuality. Bring all that in and they don't breed. Add those three together, you don't get children. Simple as that. And that's what they're trying to do. Reduce our numbers. Well, I'm saying to you, no, we're not going to reduce our numbers. We stand up. We will not allow ourselves to be aborted out of existence. And Sinn Féin are the modern day Quisling collaborators when they agreed to do that. Okay, they're on a roll right now. That'll run out of steam. We will still be here when they're long gone. We being the traditional Catholic Irish. So I would say to you, get out, go out, evangelize. When I say evangelize, get more groups like ourselves together. Have more gatherings like this. And above all, pray the rosary in public. And you see, on the 2nd of July, we'll be down here, bus loads of us from the north. We're going to get out there in Dublin and we're going to go down O'Connell Street and we're going to be praying the rosary from St. Saviour's Church all the way to the start of the actual march itself. And that is our power. We'll be carrying statues of Our Lady. We're not ashamed of it. We can't be ashamed. That is the power. The real power. It comes from God. There's nothing else. No ideology. Nothing else matters. Nothing else counts. When we have God with us, we're going to surge forward. And I can assure you, we will never surrender. People like me are never going to give up. Well, they can do whatever they want to us. Tramp us down, shoot us down, imprison us. They've tried all that with me before. I don't care. You know, I mean, the bottom line is I experienced discrimination right up to this very day. I'm not allowed to practice my occupation. I'm not allowed to travel to most countries in the world. When I do try to fly out, I'm strip searched at airports and all the rest. I'm watched 24 hours a day, all of those things. But I'm undeterred. I'm undeterred because that is the penalty. That's what we have to endure and suffer. I offer it up for the conversion of sinners and for the holy souls in purgatory. So we pray to them. We get in their heads. We're going to restore Ireland. We're going to bring this nation back. We're going to get rid of all this nonsense, all this decadence, all this filth. Get it out of this country once and for all. Bring back an Irish republic and make sure our enemies weep like a monkeypox lesion. Go to McGeough.